When I saw the teaser for By Sweet Carole in summer 2023, I immediately thought, oh, so this is a good old clock tower. My first impression wasn't wrong. The game indeed turned out to be a modern take on the Japanese classic, and all the references to Clock Tower in it are no coincidence. The author of By Sweet Carole, Chris Terrell, back in 2007 became inspired with the idea of making a fun remake of Clock Tower, but ultimately all his developments result in the horror duology remastered. In it you constantly had to run and hide from pursuers, solve puzzles, and unravel an interactively twisted plot. Overall, when creating By Sweet Carole, Chris Terrell didn't stray far from this formula, adding hand-drawn Disney skew visuals to it. The game looks stunning, captivating with the contrast between fairy tale and horror. But if you set aside this wonderful shell, it turns out that not everything is so beautiful in the kingdom of Carole. Down to the rabbit hole. When discussing By Sweet Carole, it's impossible not to mention Clock Tower again. The survival horror released in 1995 on SNES. The game differed from its genre peers. In the fragile heroine could offer nothing against the monster pursuing her. Clock Tower was famous for its slow gameplay and relentless building of anxiety. Scissorman, with his giant scissors, could look for the defenseless orphan Jennifer anywhere in the huge creepy mansion, behind a shower 13 in the bedroom, behind a 13 in the living room, or under the ceiling. It's no surprise that such an approach spawned an entire generation of imitators like Haunting Ground. A big Clock Tower fan, Italian Chris Terrell, decided to experiment with the genre, and in his remote we could not only defend ourselves, but also attack the stalker first. Moreover, in remastered Broken Porcelain, the main heroine isn't just an orphan child, she's even named Jennifer, like the protagonist of the Japanese horror. Generally, hers is worth nothing what a curious pirouette history has performed. The now bankrupt Human Entertainment Studio, then created Clock Tower decades ago, was inspired in the work by Dario Argento Giallo's films. Without his Suspiria and Phenomena, there would be no Jennifer arriving in the senior's mansion. The game literally quotes scenes from the Italian director's films. Yes, like Chris Terrell, Argento hails from the sunny country of pasta and pizza. The circle is complete. This drawing Daryl posted, obviously out of a great love for Clock Tower. This is how they envisioned a remake of 1999 game. Ince had released it himself. In By Sweet Carole, the tradition continues of building a narrative around a fragile and defenseless heroine. Her name is Lana, but don't think that Earl is simply abandoning his favorite troops. The girl is an orphan and lives in the Bunny Hall orphanage. Almost all the game's events take place within its walls. Here you can also note parallels with Carole's Alice. The heroine initially chases a rabbit, falls down, and phantasmally transforms to the magical world of Carole, whose exit often turns out to be an ordinary awakening. The boundary between dream and reality is often blurred here, which sometimes makes the story cumbersome and confusing, but fortunately it's still far from the complexity of Remastered. I will say right away, the plot here acquired the graphomania. I couldn't connect with Elana's story, even though the action takes place in the era I find appealing in late 20th century Britain. The boarding school is certainly a colorful place, but the characters inhabiting it turns out completely unremarkable. There are bully girls who naturally torment out the heroine. There are the stern caretaker Frank and the strict headmistress. Shortly before the games begins, Lana's best friends disappear. Carole mentioned in the title, and the girl search for her with all the might. The game attempts to tackle several themes at once, clumsily judging them. It speaks about the transience of time, about accepting death, but the reflections are almost always overshadowed by conversation about self-determination and a girl's place in a big and cruel world ruled by men. and this is done so crudely that you begin to feel a second-hand embarrassment for Carole, who is also a screenwriter for My Sweet Carole. The game creator condemns the headmistress tradition of holding a ball where a girl can find husbands, and then hearing herself agonize about attending such an event. All the men there ultimately turn out to be faceless monsters, and Lana sharply rebuffs the only potential suitor, even though she clearly felt sympathy for him before, all because he asked if she saw her future with him. Someone should tell Chris that different women have different goals, and some find their happiness in creating a family, while others find in careers. All these aspirations are equally valid, and it's necessary to portray men as a pack of identical monsters. Like Clock Tower, Crystal's new game is terribly slow-paced, and this continuance is hard to consider successful. My Sweet Carole can be described as a quest where the protagonist is directly controlled with arrows. Lana constantly moves from one room to another, searching for items, then goes back to use them, then returns again. On these journeys not only stretch the game's runtime, but also irritate with their crudiness. The controls certainly can be called comfortable, considering constant animation problems, chaotic jumping off ledge, walking on air, and other mirror issues that reveal the project rawness. Near the end, the game started acting up so badly that I had to exit to the main menu a couple of times to reload. What a survival horror can do without a lost candle that needs to be attached to suitable mechanism. My Sweet Carole couldn't do without one either. The game often requires pulling and turning levers and valves back and forth, and overall all these puzzles seems logical and quite adequate. Their only drawback is the prolonged nature of each action chain, even when you understand what and how needs to be done. The developer apparently have a special love for generators. Puzzles with them are everywhere. Adjust wires, connect electricity, open a passage with its help, and it would be fine if this happened a couple of times, but they appear constantly here. To the puzzle associated with them to differ. Even the creator of the house of Tesla, didn't have such obsession with electricity. I think it's high time to recognize these identical units as a sign of game designers' creative impotence. The story of My Sweet Carole is divided into chapters, and each one is new location with its own atmosphere and often its own pursuer. However, the stalkers behave identically, so the matters of interaction with them will repeat. Saw one, hid in a wall niche, held your breath, waited for the enemy to leave. Repeat each time you encounter one. While the first encounters with pursuer were scary, once you understand how predictable they are and how easy it is to get away from them, they started to tire even such an excellent player as myself. The gameplay is significantly diversified by Lana's ability to transform into the rabbit. This feature allows her to crawl into previously inaccessible places and move faster. However, running her is costly. Fragile dishes are placed everywhere, which immediately break and reveal your location to the pursuer. At some point, I simply knock down all the bottles, wait out the villain sprawling, and then calmly run around the location. I am not sure this was an intended way to play, but carefully sneaking back and forth had become simply unbearable. In some chapters, Lana gets a funny partner who would fit perfectly into the Guilty Gear fighter roster. In his best form, he can even attack enemies with an umbrella. But mostly we just have to exploit his immortality and use his separately bossing head to power the unfortunate generator. The heroine's helplessness is conditioned not only by the genre but also by the game themes and described area. And I can't help but appreciate how this is ultimately played out. Towards the end, My Sweet Carole becomes more gameplay-wise diverse, its pace accelerates and the plot grabs onto previously hung riffles, shifting the accent from mysticism to mental well-being. In the final, the game even surprised with a genre change. With such unfriendly controls, you are not particularly happy about this, but the new mechanics are primarily meant to emphasize the heroine's transformation, so the crooked execution can only be understood and forgiven. The visual style of By Sweet Carole definitely sells a game. Without the Disney animation stylization, no one would have paid attention to yet another horror with a pursuer. The locations are carefully drawn, they are multi-layered, deep, true Lana can only move in one plane. The heroine herself, her emotion and movements are animated simply delightfully. Watching how she transformed from a girl into a rabbit using a ribbon and back again doesn't get tiresome even after 10 hours. Sometimes, however, you notice moments that helped Chris Terrell and his team save on artist labor. For example, looped frames during dialogues, the same animation when Zolana catch a note and read it, but such simplification doesn't make the game less beautiful. However, I would deduct a couple of style points for the interface design. The button stands out from the overall fairy tale atmosphere, and the font isn't styled at all. Speaking of text, unfortunately, the game doesn't have many translation, and there's a lot of readability here. The story in By Sweet Carole is far from secondary. The subtitle feed disappear very quickly at a fuel to the fire. Sometimes you can only manage to read and translate on the fly if you could slip out the game. Moreover, in some cutscenes, subtitles completely disappear during pause. Figure it out however you want. Currently the game is clearly oriented toward a native speaker, and text localization could fix it. By Sweet Carole is a perfect illustration of the saying, you meet someone by their clothes, but see them by their mind. The charm of the game appearance quickly gives way to disappointment with the gameplay. The Remaster series was also criticized at release for rawness and bugs, and here's Chris Darrell, alas, remains true to himself. However, despite all of this continuity, By Sweet Carole is still quite an original project that has things to love about it. Given the experience of the Italian game designer previous work, By Sweet Carole will most likely continue to be polished and perhaps someday become the best version of itself. But for now it's hard to me to recommend it. So to sum up all, pros of the game is the game look like a cartoon and in hand-drawn, striking contrast between horror and fairy tale, reference to survival horror classics, some puzzles and location pleasantly surprise and are memorable, and cons is the game is buggy and sluggish. Irresponsible controls, the plot tries to cover many themes, but all only superficially touch upon. So, thank you for watching, please don't forget to subscribe.